I went to take Amy's 142 out for a drive the other day because it always puts a smile on my face. And look at this. This is what I noticed. That, and that. And if we look on the deck over here, this is where the car had been standing. And look at that. That is definitely diff oil. So let's go and see how we go about changing the oil seal on a 140, which is also exactly the same process to do the whole wheel bearing. Deke, shush, quiet. Now we're not going to have a cameraman for this job. It's going to be quite a long video, so forgive me if some of the production quality is a bit jerky. Let's pop the wheel off. Look at that. What a state. Yeah, okay, maybe I should have done this a bit earlier. Okay, so the first task is off with the caliper and then off with the disc. If the caliper hasn't been off in a while, it's going to be hard work. Those bolts are slightly awkward to get at, and it's a 5/8 ring spanner you want. Okay, and already I can see that there's a load of contamination around the caliper, so we're looking at a new set of pads as well. Which of course the Amazon never suffers from, because it has a clever little duct that takes the diff oil away if the seal goes and keeps it away from the brake shoes. But that's not so easy to achieve on a disc brake car. Right, that's the first bolt loosened. This being a rally car, generally all the bolts come free fairly easily because they're accessed so frequently, relatively speaking. On a road car, particularly a restoration, it could have been many years since last the bolts were removed. Let's try my little stubby spanner now. There it goes. And then we can gently lay this back there. There we go. Nicely supported to prevent the copper pipe from being stressed. Off with the two locating screws for the disc. There we go, and look at all that. So, yep, my parking shoes are also going to have to be replaced as well. So next what I need to do is to de-rig the handbrake cable at the back here. Now ordinarily this will be secured to the mechanism with a natty little pin like this that then slots onto the cable itself. We're using this little spring clip here. Now after about 6 months of use, this can often have enough corrosion here on the pin to mean that this thin metal will just twist off. So you're likely to have to destroy that in getting it out. And for note, the replacement is a 5x18mm clevis pin and a little R-clip inside. We always use stainless steel just to make life easy in the future. So a 5x18mm clevis pin. Okay, there's not a chance that I'm going to be able to film the handbrake cable mechanism on Amy's car. It's just all obscured. So let's work on this one and hopefully you'll see exactly what's involved. Okay, so my first task is, as we discussed earlier, to remove this pin that secures the cable to the operating arm. Now this hasn't been off in probably since the car was built, so it's going to be a bit of a devil. Nope, I'm going to have to drift it out from the other side. Okay, so here we go with the drift. Well, let's just give it a little knock directly with the hammer and see if we can't get some sort of, not much motion, no. Okay, I'm making a bit of progress there, so let's continue. There it goes. I think we've done it. Let's see if we can get the pliers on it this time. There it goes. There we are. That's the pin out. So now the cable is free to move, but it's still attached to the back plate here. So having got that off, we now take the cup at the narrow diameter of the spring. The spring then comes off, and there is a cup at the other end which you might have to remove the wee rubber shroud to get at. There we go, and off comes that cup. So that's the two cups and the spring off, now leaving you simply with the nut down here. Okay, so we have the lock nut here, which is a 15/16 across here, and it's going to be a devil to get at. And then you've got a couple of flats that are 11/16 at the back here, just to lock off. And I guess the tip is here that all this area wants to be soaked in diesel fuel days beforehand to try and make this whole task of disassembly of the handbrake cable simple. Anyway, let's just go in and there it goes, that's freed off. And now we unscrew the wretched thing. There we go. Off comes the nut. It has a lock washer beneath it. If I just draw out the cable, there we go. That's the setup. Lock washer and the nut. Let's go and do that on Amy's car, and I'll be back with you when I've finished. Okay, so we've cleared away the handbrake cable now. There is that wee pin for which we have used a clevis pin to replace it in stainless steel. Then off came the spring top cup. Then the spring came off the cable. The bottom cup just slots off. And then that tricky nut had to unwind from the thread before this came out. So, handbrake cable is now off. My next task is to remove the parking brakes. 4 9/16 bolts that secure the entire mechanism here to the axle. So that will allow the parking brakes to come off easily and the back plate. So rotate your half shaft around so you can get at that one. And there we go, off comes the aft clip. And the forward clip. Now you can disengage the adjuster, noting that which way round the wheel is. The wheel on the right hand side of the car is facing forward. There. And then just pop it off at the bottom. And there we go, that's that off. And now we can simply use, is that it? There we go. A convenient method for removing the half shaft is simply use the brake disc. Pop your wheel nuts on, a few threads, half a dozen threads. There we go. And there it goes. And we can now draw the half shaft out with the back plate. There it goes. And there we are. And there's the brake, the handbrake operating arm. A note here, I didn't show you, but the back plate has to just maneuver over this roll pin here to make it free. So watch out for that as you take the half shaft out, that your back plate is free of this roll pin. Okay, let's take a look at this half shaft assembly now. First of all to note is you can take the handbrake operating arm out and its little dust bellows and lift the brake back plate up and away. There we go. Which leaves you working from outside to in, the half shaft flange, the plate that secures the bolt bearing in position. There is the offending seal that has failed, the bearing, and then the snap ring that holds the bearing in position. And therefore you can see that you have to destroy the bearing in order to replace the half shaft oil seal, which is annoying because this here snap ring is the wee devil to get off. So there's two techniques that we can consider. One is to try cutting a nick through, deeply through the snap ring, and this runs a distinct risk of touching out on the half shaft and creating a stress weak point. So although I do use this technique from time to time, it is risky and you've got to be so very careful. So the other technique, which I haven't tried before and I'm going to try today, is to heat up this ring. And hopefully we're going to heat it up enough to be able to lift it off or at least drift it down the shaft and off. So I'm going to go and try that. First time, it's not something I've done before. So I'm going to go and try, get my inductive heater out and see if I can make any progress. Okay, I failed miserably with my inductive heater. I can only get about 250 degrees into this area here, so I'm going back to cutting. So my first task is just to cut away the bearing. Now just push the seal out of the way. There's the bearing inner race there and the snap ring. So now we start going at the snap ring, desperately trying not to touch out on here, on the half shaft itself. Now I'm going to put 2 wraps of masking tape on that surface so that hopefully I'll get an indication when I start approaching the half shaft and before I get to it with my cutting disc. And in we go. Okay, it looks just over 1/2 mil left to go. I'm going to give it a bit more. Okay, now I'm going to try the cold chisel on it. Not an orthogonal blow, which would try and split it entirely, but I'm going to try a slightly off-center blow like that so I can see if it spins as well, which will give me a good indication of how close we are to freeing it. Oh, look at that. That moved without me touching it. Okay. Right, well that's rather good. But that's the easy bit. Next is the difficult bit. So just cut away the masking tape, and there, that's gone off, and pleasingly I haven't touched the half shaft surface at all. Now, having got that off, we're left with the bearing itself, which is nastier because we've got the higher shoulder here that you can't touch out. So what we're going to do is try and do the same trick to ease that off. 1 and 2, and let's go to it, remembering that this surface is higher than this surface. Indeed, I suppose, yeah, let's put on a, there we go, 1, 2. So we've got a nice bit of witness on both sides. Let's go at it. Well, I'm not sure I dare go any further. Let's give that a go. Obviously there's going to be a lot more metal this end than was present in our snap ring, but this end should be fairly quick to fracture. Well, it's rotating, but it's not fracturing yet. I think that has just fractured. Yeah, I reckon that has. Off with the tape. And let's see if we can't drift it down. Yay! Look at that. And yep, there is. We've managed to avoid touching out on the insulating tape. So that's a technique I haven't used before, and I'm quite pleased with that. Insulating tape, to give you an idea of when you're approaching the no-go half shaft metal. So off with the ring, and I don't know if you can tell there, but you can see it's just a fracture there, it's not a cut. There's the cut, doesn't go through and just leaves it to fracture. Likewise the bearing, just a fracture line down there, and there's my cut, and you can see how shallow the cut is on the outboard end, but so long as you can get close on the inboard end, then you should be able to fracture the metal. It should be stressed enough for you just to fracture it, as I've just proved. So there you go, nerve-wracking indeed, but if you're careful, it comes. And there's our offending half shaft oil seal. Okay, I'm going to go away and clean this, remembering this is going to go back on first of all before you do any other work with putting on seals, bearing or snap ring. This plate has to go back on. So I'm going to clean it up, make sure all the grindings have gone, all the dirt has gone, so you've got a nice clean half shaft to work with. I'll be back. So we've got the snap ring, the bearing and the oil seal off, and the plate. Let's go in and inspect those surfaces now. That's where the snap ring lives, that's where the bearing resides, all nice surfaces. But now look at this mess here. I'm really hoping you can see that, because it is disgusting. It's like, I don't know, it's like varnish that somebody's put their fingers on. It's that sort of a surface. Okay, look, there, that's good polished surface. The rest of this, that's good polished surface. The rest of it has lost. It's hardening. And this is where the oil seal runs. So actually, rather than being a surprise that it let go, it is now a surprise that it lasted so long. That is completely wrecked, and no obvious reason for it. Can't explain that. Just a complete mess. Look at that. Oh, that's a lovely comparison. Good polished surface here into disgusting roughed surface here. Here's one I prepared earlier, and there we go. Look at that. That's a nice consistent satin finish, and you can see where the old seal ran, this little 1 mil wide line here. So that is the shaft we're going to go for. So of course the next stage is to fit the new oil seal and bearing. There's two types on the 140. There is an early 68-69 and the rest. This is the other type of axle fitted to the 140, and I'm pretty sure this is the early type. Notable that it's got a bolt securing the bottom fulcrum of the parking brakes. And it's quite possible that this change happened with the B18s. So it's possible, would I say probable maybe, that the early bearing kit goes into this axle, all B18s, and that have this bolt arrangement on the bottom fulcrum. And that early kit has an oil seal that sits inboard of the bearing, as opposed to the one that I've taken off Amy's car, where it goes outboard of the bearing. And you can see, even in the packet, the considerably different diameter. Okay, so early bearing kit, 1968-69, part number 384291. You get the bearing, which goes on first, the snap ring, which secures it in position, and a choice of two half-shaft oil seals, quite possibly both of which you use, actually. I can't quite remember that. And then there's the late type, which is the bottom parking brake pivot has a roll pin going through it instead of the bolt, and possibly all B20 cars, and that will take the late type kit. And the late kit consists of, first of all, the big diameter half-shaft oil seal, which goes on first. They also give another one. I've never actually found what car that fits to, so can't tell you what that one's for. Then, of course, the bearing goes on, and finally the snap ring. There we go, that's early and late. We are going to fit the late to this replacement half-shaft. So that leaves us with the task of removing the outer of the bearing from the axle. And there are various tools on the market that will do that nicely for you. However, the way I prefer, because it's just so elegant, is to run a ring of weld around it. So let's just go and do that. So here we are, and there's the bearing outer, and I'm going to run a lick of weld around that internal surface. As it cools, it'll then contract, and we'll just be able to pull it out with our fingers. I've stuffed a rag down here to stop any weld spatter disappearing off down my axle tube. Nothing much else to say, I'll just set to it. I reckon that should do it. There it comes. And that's me. Spatter a weld in there. There we go. Right, and now of course we're going to withdraw the stuffing and make jolly sure all this is clear of anything disgusting. Okay, my first task is just to put a light smear of grease where the oil seal is going to go, and I'm also just going to put some on where the bearing and snap ring are going to reside. Next, do not forget, because this will really annoy you if you do, your plate on. Oil seal, there we go, take it all the way to the end there. And then the bearing and the wee ring that holds it all together goes outboard, like so. So there's that small snap ring that holds the whole bearing together. It's on the outside. Now we'll go over to the press and press it all together. Okay, so I'm going to use an old bearing shell to make sure I press neatly on there without damaging the half shaft. In the meantime, I've put the snap ring into the oven to get it to 100 degrees, just to make that easier to slide on. Now we have to just move these jaws out a touch. Okay, and on we go. And just one last check. We have the small ring outboard. So the bearing is the right way round. There we go, that's hard up against the shoulder. Out the hot snap ring comes from the oven. Drop it onto the half shaft. There we go, all ready to go back in the car now. Okay, just run your finger one last time to make sure there's nothing disgusting in there. And then we're just going to put a wee slither of grease around just to assist it in. Now the bellows are always a tricky little devil. I think they are definitely easier to fit now before you install the rest. However, they may well just pop off during the process anyway. Let's just see where we get to on this one then. Incidentally, at the time of recording, this is still available, this item. Quite possibly it was used throughout the life of the 240 and 700 series. Okay, so then we just place the handbrake lever through, and then not forgetting that lever is going to go through this slot here. So just supporting it gently. There it goes, and there. Okay, so that's in position. We're ready for the half shaft. I'm just going to put a squirt of oil over that just to ease it in, because this might be quite an old half shaft in spite of the fact that I've cleaned it up. Yep, that's still in the right place. There we go. That has engaged nicely. And right now we've just got the oil seal sitting proud. Okay, so my oil seal is sitting proud now. So I'm actually going to offer up the bolts just to get the oil seal in the right place, and therefore the bearing, and use that to press in both the seal and the bearing. There it is, that's seated home. There we go. Okay, so all of a sudden you have now finished the task of replacing the oil seal and the half shaft bearing. So the next phase is to get those parking brakes installed again. Now, since I'm all stable here, I am going to fit the handbrake cable first. I just check. Look at that, that's nice and freely moving. So I'm happy with that. I'm not in the game of having to replace the cable itself. Okay, I can't, for the same reasons as disassembly, show you behind here. I'm just going to talk it through, and I hope you'll trust me and bear with me. So first of all, splodge of copper slip on the thread. That goes through the plate at the back here. Then of course it's the lock, washer and the nut. Take the turns up by hand. Now I just nip underneath, and while securing the cable with my 11/16 or my 17mm, whichever is appropriate. $17mm it would appear in this case. There it goes. And my 15/16 ring spanner. I just nip up that nut. Then it's on with the base washer. There we go, that's against it. On with the spring. Now this stage, getting this cup on might be easier if you actually detach the center yoke of the handbrake cable and therefore allow the load of cable to pull through here, and then that'll make life a lot easier. Okay, so here's where the handbrake cable all attaches. Now I think the easiest place to do it is to remove the clevis pin here, and that is what I'm going to do. Take some of the stress off it. Out comes the pin. There. And now we'll be able to pull some of this cable through, making it easy to fit the spring. Okay, so now I can grab a load of handbrake cable. There it comes through. Pop the end cup over the cable itself and back, and then push the handbrake cable back to keep that in position. I'm going to go back underneath and reconnect that clevis pin. Okay, and finally in with the clevis pin onto the handbrake operating arm. There it goes, in it goes, and my R-clip. Good. Next is going to be the task of fitting the parking brakes. Now, I'm not sure what the technically correct way of doing this is, to be honest, but here's how I do it. I put those clips in first. This whole task seems annoyingly difficult. But I've yet to find a clean way of doing it. Okay, then on with the forward clip. And the aft clip. In with my copper slipped lower bolt. Copper slipped upper bolt. And that's our clip secured. Now let's go and fetch the new parking brakes. Here we go, some lovely old stock Ferodos. And now look what we have here. Note this little beautiful spring clip that retains the pressure plate on the aft shoe. So the spring goes on the inside of the shoe and the plate goes on the aft shoe. So we just pull that off like so, rotate the little plate out. That's what the plate looks like. There. That's its rather beautiful retaining clip, just there. Okay, so that's how the shoes are going to go on, with the round cutout at the bottom. In goes the plate into this cutout, like so.
No, can we? What does the plate look like?
And then working behind, we hook that hooky end there underneath the bottom of the plate, and then snap the other end over there, like so.
Beautiful.
And that's what it's going to look like from the side we can see.
Yep.
In goes the return spring, which may or may not stay in place. And we offer up. And what we're going to have to do is we've got to get that brake operating arm that's behind here to engage in that. To engage in this hole and in that hole, whilst getting these little promontories here and here in the middle of the shoe over their clips. So it's all a bit of a game. Let's try it like this first. So I am, okay, we're going to leave the spring off. Okay, I engage it on the bottom pin here. Okay, can you get in there? And I've slotted it onto the handbrake operating lever here. So we're engaged on the bottom fulcrum and the operating arm is through. Now I can push inside of the clip here. Let's do the same on the front. I drop it over. No, that's not quite going to work, is it? Okay, so I've got it. Yes, that's it. I've got it over the handbrake operating arm here, almost, and I've got it engaged on the fulcrum. Now we've just got to get it into the clip up here. So I just push the clip out a bit like that, there, and it's there. Look at that. Okay. On the fulcrum.
Yep.
There's the operating arm, and we're gauged inside the clip.
Yep.
Let's put the bottom spring on. These pick tools have all sorts of purposes, presumably none of which were what they were designed for, but fitting springs is one of them. Okay, so I've dropped it inside the aft hole, and here we go. And we're over. It's not quite engaged, it's half on the metal. Okay, there it is. And it's just balancing on the metal here, so if I just assist it, it'll, there, in position. So that's the lower, all secured beautifully. Now, out, out. Remembering the wheel faces forward on the right hand side and it faces aft on the left hand side. We're on the right hand side, so we're going to face forward. Just going to give it a squirt of my favourite ceramic grease there and reassemble it. We're going to make it as relaxed as we can, so screw it in. There we go. Wipe it clean. And make sure there's a tiny bit of lubrication in that pin. And I would say next we're going to fit the upper spring first before we put that adjuster in. There goes the upper spring in there, like so. And finally we're going to take those apart and fit the adjuster. So engaging on the rear end, I pull apart with my fingers and allow to relax. There it is, parking brake installed. Okay, we're just going to wipe around with some brake cleaner on the old disc there. This has already been through the parts washer, so all the contaminating oil should have gone already. There we go. Now, being steel on steel and in quite an exposed position, it can often happen that the disc will corrode onto the hub, making it very difficult in the future. So I think I would always tend to just give a little lick of ceramic grease around the two faces here and here. That. There we are. Brake cleaner, clean it off the drum. Yeah, that should be nice enough. The oily fingers off, there we go. Just check, yeah, that all looks lovely. And back on with the disc, making sure that your screw holes are there and there. Of course, they're new half shafts, so those threads are a bit stiff. And now we set up the handbrake. So through this inspection hole up the top here, you will see that knurled wheel sitting against the return spring here. And you're going to rotate that knurled wheel down until this locks off. Best tool for this is probably the flat blade screwdriver. In we go, and one. There's going to be lots of clicks initially before anything happens. You'll start to feel it get a bit more resistance as it approaches. There, let's try that. Yeah, that's sort of getting there. And basically what you want to do is keep doing it until it locks. And we're very close there. So I'm going to do it one at a time now. Okay, the next one is going to be locked, I'm fairly sure. There, that's locked. Back it off 4 now, so 4 clicks up. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there we go. Now I would just go and pull on the handbrake, release it, and then just check it again. Okay, so down. One, two, there's 3, 4, and 1 more, I reckon. Yep, there, and back 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, I'm going to go for that. Okay, so pair of scrap parking brakes. On with the caliper. I cheated a bit. I took out the old pads a short while ago. So there are no pads in this caliper. On with a bit of copper slip. Into the bottom hole, wiggle it around a bit so you can get a thread. Is that a thread? Yeah, that's a thread. Into the top hole. There we go, got a thread. Probably do that one up by hand as well, yeah, we can. And finish off with our 5/8 ring spanner. One of those occasions where you wish you had a nice ratcheting stubby combination spanner. And nip them up. There we go, that's good and tight. Nice new set of pads. Okay, a load of copper slip on the back plate, which is basically going to work as an anti-squeal. A little smear on the top and bottom sliding face. And in we go, except of course the piston needs to go out a bit. I'm going to use an old pad to do that. There we go, that's gone. There it goes. And ease this piston back a bit. There we go. A lick of anti-squeal and a lick of lube. In it goes. Smidge on the top pin. Through it goes. Pop the R pin into the inboard end. There it is, facing out at me now. There it goes in that. Then the inboard spring. Like so. Put the bottom pin halfway across. And generally, probably easiest to use your fingernail to engage the, there we go. So the pin is now locating the spring, put it 3/4 of the way across and put the outboard spring in. Nope. Just going to use a tool to compress the spring. There we go. The shaft around so you can get the R-clip in. And that's that done. Okay, so that's the pads in, wheels ready to go back on. Now, some of you will notice that this is a competition car and will say, oh, why haven't I fitted Mintex M1144 on the rears? Well, to be honest, the rears just don't have to work very hard. Even when we set them up for a rearward bias on the braking, which we do sometimes like, the standard pads are plenty good enough. They have good grip, they've got good bite, and they don't tend to cook up. So we just fit standards to the rear and Mintex M1144 to the front. Deek, shush. There you go. Obviously, I'm left with the task right now of going over and fitting new parking brakes to the left-hand side and new disc pads to the left-hand side, but it's all the same process. I hope you found that useful because it's taken some thought, but I think that's a pretty good way we've gone about it there. I'm quite pleased with that, and it's really nice to have discovered that failure on the half shaft that caused the oil leak in the first place. So we've now got round that. Thank you.